Everyone's talking about AI, but who's actually implementing it? I'm Jenna Ahern, the CEO of Guardian Owl Digital, a search engine marketing firm rooted in integrity and transparency in the digital age. AI and marketing are at a crossroads, and the technology is moving faster than most business leaders can keep up with. That's why we created Go AI, a podcast series where we interview leaders in various industries about all things artificial intelligence. With each guest, my co-host Connor Rafferty and I will explore the applications that this rapidly evolving technology has for business leaders and their industries. Let's go AI. Artificial intelligence is a field where computers are taught how to think. Though the usual imagery of AI involves robots, the truth is that most AI comes in the form of digital algorithms. AI for business owners is what this podcast is about. And I couldn't be more thrilled to introduce our guest today, Chris Chase, President and CEO of Discernity, which offers high-speed internet services to property owners, multifamily properties in particular. I've known Chris here for several years. I want to give him a few kudos. He is dedicated with a clear vision for not just Discernity, but anyone that he comes in contact with. He's extremely knowledgeable, very, very bright, friendly, and has more professional ethics than most people I know. He is what's right, not just in business, but also in the world. You won't find someone, in my opinion, with higher ethics than Chris. So I have a lot of regard for you, and I just couldn't be more thrilled that you're here today on the podcast. Yeah. And so, Chris, before we get into AI, is there anything that you want the audience to know in particular about Discernity?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah.
The thing about Discernity, like you mentioned, we do provide internet for multifamily properties. And our niche is we are a private network. So our competitors are the big box companies, the Comcast, Spectrum from the cable side, AT&T, et cetera, from the telecommunications side, from the old phone company side, if you will. They're built for having 20, 30, 40 million single family homes on their network versus we build a private network just for your apartment community. So what? Well, what that's important for, especially with artificial intelligence, it's really going to pay dividends, is we have a direct connection to the internet. So we have a fiber line coming from the internet somewhere, like a point of presence, to the property. And so you don't go through the hops. So, but if you're, let's say a cable company, for example, you'll see a big cable box outside the apartment complex, and it goes to the next cable box in the neighborhood and the next one. So all these hops, and it slows down the connection. So with artificial intelligence, you're going to need very low latency, which is basically the delay. You're going to do things in real time. So we eliminate that delay. And by having that private connection, it also, we have faster upload speeds, video and images. You got to be able to send they're very data intensive. You got to send that stuff fast. So, cable, you have 10 meg, 20 meg upload versus ours is, 500 meg, a gig. We could even do multi-gig if you need it. So you're actually better off if you want to be a power user on the internet, living in an apartment than having your own house.
Okay, well, we're 3 minutes in and I've already learned something. So we're already on the right track. Yeah. Chris, thank you for sharing that. That, I think, gave to me a really great introduction, not just of Discernity, but internet and cable and how that works in general. So kicking off the AI discussion with just a very broad question, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but when you hear the phrase artificial intelligence, what comes to mind?
I think of the root of it, intelligence. And you think about what separates us humans from other species is we have this intelligence. They do too, of course, animals, but we have a unique intelligence. And now we have this artificial intelligence that can maybe take all of our collective intelligence. Like you might be smart in one way that I'm not, and hopefully I have something, and then you have something that we don't have. So it takes all the collective good of us and provides this artificial intelligence, like the best of all of us, if you will.
So when did you first hear about AI, and what were your first impressions of it?
When I was a little kid, my dad took me to see this movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, okay.
Have you guys heard of that?
I have. I've watched some of it.
Yeah. Have you really?
Yes, I have. Well, and that from my parents is how. I think it was on VHS.
Yeah.
Like it's, yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I was a kid, too young to be there probably. So I was like, Dad, let me leave. Get me out of here. But I remember it. And I remember the premise was Hal, the computer controlling the spaceship, and then he turned evil against the crew and so forth. He had them hostage or whatever. So that was my first introduction to artificial intelligence, was that. But I don't think of artificial intelligence as that evil force, but that was my first one.
Well, I think that's pretty common.
Yeah.
AI has been a major technological force since the 1950s, but really didn't even capture the public's attention for a sustained amount of time until the release of ChatGPT in November of 2022. And since then, AI has been a staple in the news, media, and marketing materials, much of which is targeted towards business owners.
Yeah.
And Chris, what have you seen about AI over the past year that has particularly caught your interest? And twofold question, what about AI, question-wise, do you want answered?
What's caught my eye about it is we use it as a company more than I realized. So knowing I'm coming to this podcast, I wanted to prepare. I started talking to some members of my team, and the routers we use of these private networks have all kinds of artificial intelligence built into them. Some things you mentioned before with the cybersecurity, et cetera. But one of the things is something called last gasp. This last gasp senses electricity is going out through the artificial intelligence and sends out a quick pulse that lets us know in our data center, hey, we went out because of electricity. So now we know what we're up against. So instead of trying to troubleshoot our routers and stuff, we called the property. Hey, why is your power out? Oh, and it was like at night, of course. It's never during the day. And,
Yeah, sure.
We didn't pay our bill. Like, okay. And that's what resolved it. So it was the artificial intelligence sending that last gasp.
Wow.
So I started to discover all those kinds of things. And so really caught my eye, to answer your question, is just all the things that we do. Another thing is we have really started investing more and more in these heat maps.
Okay.
And what they are, you go into an apartment complex, whether it's existing or getting ready to be built, and we have this heat map software that simulates, if you put the access point here, what's the wireless coverage going to be? If you put it here, and it incorporates, do you have brick like we have around us here? Do you have plaster? Do you have, is it built with sticks?
Wow.
Because the Wi-Fi signal penetrates some things well and some things not as well. So where you put that access point matters. So it's helping us identify, it's easier to put it over here by this door. Maybe we save $50 per room times 1,000, that's $50,000. Yeah, but you're going to run a truck roll at $100 a pop because you didn't put it over here. All right, so you move it over there, you get better coverage, and actually saves you more in the long run, and the customer has a better experience. And then there's also a thing called, I know I'm getting in the weeds, but
No, you're not. This isn't, this is incredible. Like
Okay.
I'm learning, and I'm sure our audience is too.
Oh, yeah.
Especially, I'm still on the last gasp, based on AI. That's incredible.
Yeah,
so,
my chief technology officer and my business partner, Dale, taught me about that. So,
wow.
yeah.
I love what you said about you may have to invest a little bit more upfront, but in the long run, you're actually going to save money. And it sounds like it might be safer as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then there's something called like Wi-Fi optimization. You think like, okay, you have your signal that you need to manage, but there's also the power levels of your signal because you're in a multifamily environment where, you have homes right next to you, maybe on top of you, maybe below you, probably all of the above. If you have too powerful of a signal, your neighbor does too, then they're colliding. So it's almost like if you're all speaking at the same time and you have thin walls, you can't really hear. So you have to say it again and again. That means you're sending your messages back and forth and it slows it down. So it manages your power levels, but not just within your unit, within the whole place. Like, okay, based on your usage history, we don't know what you used it for, but you used a lot of data and this person doesn't. The artificial intelligence figures out, all right, how strong should the power be and the latency and so forth. So there's a lot going on well before you even realized it. Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad that you get to talk about it here.
Yeah.
Last gasp, that's an example of anomaly detection, which is the power should not be going out this quickly.
Yes.
Why is it happening? And AI just immediately recognizes that, sees the anomaly, sends it back to you. But the heat mapping, what are, in terms of predicting, all right, how will we get the best coverage based on this, this, and that?
Yeah.
And this is kind of seen across many industries with the use of AI. Like in manufacturing, for instance, AI is kind of used similarly to heat mapping, where manufacturers will try to find out, okay, what's the best way to organize kind of our factory floor with different devices. Yeah, just wanted to kind of connect that back to all the general themes and how AI kind of helps in these kind of certain ways.
That's one of the things is like, okay, what do you want AI to do for you as a company? Back to your, they design the manufacturing floor and the processes and so forth. One of the things is we want them to help us design our networks, so not just the heat mapping for the unit, but the fiber optics that go to the building and the units and so forth. And they can really help us streamline it. So we build in the redundancy and so forth. So yeah, they're good complementary application.
Going back to earlier when Chris arrived, and before we launched the podcast, we were just talking about swimming and training. And, when you train with people that are better than you, you naturally evolve and get a little bit better yourself.
Yes.
And so, the rising tide lifts all ships. Hopefully AI can collectively help that a little bit. Well, in the past year, the most probably notable AI development is generative AI. And so ChatGPT is probably the most famous example in that and can generate essay-length blocks of content at a time. But there's also tools like DALL-E and Midjourney that allow you to automate the creation of images. Video created by AI is expected to become a larger phenomenon in the coming years. Chris, what role, if any, do you see this technology playing in your particular industry? I know you mentioned the speed and data, and obviously video takes up a lot of data.
Yeah. I think it will impact ours, but we'll impact it even more.
Really?
Yeah. And the reason is because you think about, the delay.
Yep.
You think about the speeds and the upload speeds I spoke about. But then you start thinking about the new Google, the Bard version's Gemini.
Yes.
I'm sure you all
it's
know.
It's a little scary.
You're a Google house. Yeah. But it's multimodal. So instead of just having an interface for text, and then you have another interface for video, and it combines it separately, tries to put it back together again, the Google Gemini is supposed to do it all in one spot. So you have an image and you have text, whether it's a video frame or a movie or a picture, and you send it up and it does all this analysis and it brings it back down. Now you have a bigger training set that has, it's more meaningful data. You can do it faster for you. So we can help that data get up there faster and so forth because video is so data intensive. And then you think about, you just have to create the highway for people. Like Uber couldn't have been invented without the smartphone, without the ubiquitous access.
Yeah.
But because that was out there, somebody thought of Uber, something crazy no one could have thought of back when we were young. So somebody out there is already probably thinking about some sort of thing that's like, what? That's nuts. But you have the speed and the lack of delay with the latency. You build that highway for people, and they can do things that none of us can even dream about right now. Discernity also wants to integrate the people portion of it too. So you have the artificial intelligence, but you marry it with the people and empathy for your customers. And I feel like that's where we can impact the industry.
I agree with that, and knowing Discernity.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So since AI and machine learning are both kind of dependent on data for success, many businesses don't really kind of realize just how strong of a link there is between the quality of data that is given to the AI and kind of the performance that the AI gives. They kind of think that it's just AI, it'll just do great no matter what. Unfortunately, that's not the case. There's a sort of requirement on the business's part to prepare their data. And this can involve something as simple as like spell checking, things like sales figures or just data about like customer names and whatnot, making sure that it's reported well and that everything's kind of accurate. As a business owner, what do you know about preparing your data for AI? And what would you like to know?
Yeah, I really like that question. It's very timely for our business. We have just literally last week bought some knowledge-based software.
Oh, wow.
Doc 360.
Okay.
There's lots of packages out there. But the reason we bought it was actually not for artificial intelligence, but you can see where it's going to prepare us for it. So you don't have to be, a Fortune 50 company to prepare your data. You can be a smaller, medium-sized business to prepare your data. And the reason we bought it is, there's a labor shortage out there. And then there's a lot of talented people that might have, the characteristics of hard work, really smart, high integrity, creative, but they might not be subject matter experts at something. But if you can put the information in front of them, they can go with it with scripts or whatever. So we bought the software to do it. So we're basically writing it for you bring in somebody with good characteristics, but no subject matter expertise, and maybe they can help you troubleshoot.
Wow.
Okay. So maybe they're a good listener and they care and they're smart, but they don't know, okay, how do I help a customer, reboot the router or something, And so you have scripts that do that, but you need all the data. And okay, at this apartment complex, you have a network design like this. But this one, because each one's its own, it's a boutique, right? It's designed that way. So you have to have the data do that. So we're going through that process. But you realize by doing that, well, that's what you need for artificial intelligence. You have to have your data organized.
Right.
So get a data set anyway for maybe hiring people. Even if you don't think you're going to use artificial intelligence right away, you probably need it for hiring people so you can ramp them up faster and make them effective. And it broadens your talent pool because you don't have to have a subject matter expert. You can have somebody who has characteristics.
And it's a little easier to teach that subject matter than it is empathy.
Exactly.
Or, some core values that need
Exactly.
time to develop.
Yeah.
That's great, Chris. AI is often pitched, I think, to business owners functioning like this assistant, not just to the business owners, but to the employees as well.
Yeah.
And one example is Microsoft Copilot, which can help create spreadsheets in Excel and rewrites in Microsoft Word, and even create written summaries from PowerPoint and vice versa. What tasks in your business would you like to delegate to AI, whether it's today or in the future?
Yeah. One of the things is I mentioned scripts for our contact centers when you're talking with people, or some people don't want to talk to you. They want to talk to, the chat.
Yes.
So that's where I think I'd like to see is sometimes you have to go off script
Mm-hmm.
and have the intelligence of going off script. So you don't ask a bunch of questions you don't need to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And it saves the person time. We have 66% of our support calls are resolved within 8 minutes. When somebody calls in, including, by the time you pick up the phone, et cetera, all within 8 minutes, and that's considered pretty good. We don't want to really go any faster because then you're rushing people. Go slower because
Time.
it's people's time. And so we're proud of that statistic, but maybe you can go faster without rushing by not asking some questions and so forth.
Especially if your system, you already have as Discernity all the information on this customer. There's chat functions out there that if you land on Discernity's site based on your data, obviously if it's clean coming in, I recognize your IP address. I recognize maybe the phone number if you're on, and I can say, hey, Chris, thanks for visiting.
Yeah.
How can I help you? And I already have all your information at the fingertips.
That's a great point. You don't have to say, what's your name? It's kind of like in the doctor's office. You have to fill out the same form.
Exactly. It's so redundant.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great application. Yeah.
So this next one might be a little uncomfortable, but Guardian Now Digital does not like to shy away from more uncomfortable questions about artificial intelligence. But as a business owner, what about artificial intelligence scares you?
I'm not one of those paranoid people that worries about the artificial intelligence taking over the world.
Like how?
Like how? I think because people are so hypersensitive and aware that the developers of that won't. The concerns I have are more in line with if you only have the bigger companies that have access to doing it, you might not have small companies that might be innovators, that can be disruptors. Google wasn't always the biggest company. Microsoft wasn't. They were disruptors.
They started in a garage.
They started in a garage. So there might be people starting a garage that can do something, even better. So its concern is the bigger players are the ones that can do it. Regulation. Don't want it to be underregulated because you want to keep it safe, but you don't want it to be overregulated. Politicians are good at politics and fundraising and that stuff, but are they subject matters for artificial intelligence? They're not. So, they have to really lean on subject matter experts, people that are doing it, and trust that they have good intentions. Because I think most of them do, for the most part. I'm surprised if they don't. Other concerns are, let's say the United States gets the regulatory environment correct and it's optimized. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's really good. There might be countries out there that don't, and you have some bad actors, and they have some brilliant person out there. And as we all know, hacks can come from anywhere. And so that concerns me. But that's one of those things you have to just trust God's not going to let a robot take over the world or something because it's out of your hands.
Got to kind of have some blind faith there. And, you touched on, I think, just a little bit about the ethics portion. It feels like a race, and you have hundreds and thousands of developers and engineers who, even if they have good intentions, they are working on the technology aspect. And it seems, at least in our experience, there's a little bit of a gap between the amount of people working on the ethics and legislation and regulation side of it. So, that's always I think, a concern that most people have. So one of the key things to understand about AI is that it lacks common sense. And so AI can detect dips in a network's performance and recommend ways to improvement, but on a deeper level, it does not understand why someone would even want Wi-Fi in the first place, for instance. So we mention this because it's important for business owners to know the limits of AI if they want to make the most of it. And even in areas where AI performs well, it can take a human's common sense to oversee the automated work. In your industry, Chris, what would you identify as some of the common sense areas of roles that you would always want a human being to be involved in?
We touched upon briefly earlier, but empathy.
Yep.
So let's say somebody calls into our contact center and they lost their job. And they can't pay their bill. We've had this happen before. Hopefully not too many residents are listening to this and take advantage of it. But, you can tell it's authentic.
Yeah.
Like, look, we'll float you for a month or we'll work something. We work something out.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence can't make that judgment call. Also, not all people have the same amount of technical acumen. So they call in and, hey, my wireless isn't working for some reason or it's not doing what I want it to do. You have two people that can call in with that. One's, to say, a senior citizen that didn't grow up with technology.
Yeah.
And the other one's, a computer science majored from Harvard. You have to approach it differently. With maybe the senior citizen, you're like, okay, do you know where the on-off switch is? And, you go through some of the basic things. The computer science person, like, all right, adjust your DHCP settings, like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing where you have to be able to read people.
Mm-hmm. Truly discern. Pun intended.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of why a lot of the emerging wisdom around AI is that you should always use it as an assistant in like an assistant role rather than give it the full responsibility.
Yes.
Because of this lack of common sense, we kind of like to return to the idea of selling shoes. It's like a simple metaphor for it where the AI can write copy about selling shoes, but it can't wear a shoe. It doesn't know why anybody, like what a shoe even feels like. So why would it want this? Why would it want a comfortable slipper over a shoe has like no insole and it's basically rough?
Yeah.
It doesn't really even understand that.
And do the colors go together? And does it fit well?
Exactly.
The complexity of just what common sense is a very complex thing we're starting to realize in working with artificial intelligence. But that is a very interesting point that you bring up in terms of the customer service and AI, because chatbots are becoming more common within the customer service context, even just with like automated calls and whatnot. And one of the things that can be done in that case is that you can use it as an assistant in that it can resolve, you mentioned earlier, like the really simple questions. It can cut down the amount cut down the amount of time. Yeah. Are there any questions that you would think would cue to an AI that like, oh, this needs to go to a human being within the context of network solutions for like a customer calling in?
I'll give an example. I forget the years before the pandemic. So let's say 2018, 2019. You may remember on Christmas Day, there was a bombing in Nashville. Mm-hmm. It is right outside the AT&T data center in Nashville. It's a big point of presence for the internet down there. Now, many of our properties have redundant networks. So we have multiple providers coming into our network. So if one goes down, the other one stays up. But at that time, we had some properties, AT&T was our carrier.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it's our network on AT&T backbone. And so we had one in Louisville. We had one in Western Kentucky. And I think those are the only ones that were vulnerable, maybe one in Indianapolis, that were all affected by this bombing. Mm-hmm. And, on Christmas Day, people are out there troubleshooting. They're out there troubleshooting. Why is this building down? You can't figure it out. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of put two and two together. Hey, we heard the news today that there's this bombing outside the AT&T, and you're able to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And that's one of those things where sometimes, artificial intelligence probably wouldn't be able to put those things together very easily.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard to replace a human heart, too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Chris, this has been, I think, a very insightful conversation. I have learned a lot. I hope you've found this valuable, and hopefully our audience does as well. Is there anything that you want to leave the podcast with or the listeners with?
First of all, thank you both for having me. I'm very grateful. I enjoyed preparing for it because it made me realize how much we use artificial intelligence. I think it's changed me. Because after preparing for it, I'm like, we can really step on the gas in some of this stuff with artificial intelligence. I want to get behind this. And now I'm really interested in it. So I'm very grateful for you having me on as a guest, but also for, exposing me to something that we're lucky. We're born in a time when the internet came out. Well, the internet's been out since before we're born. But the web came out and it changed the world.
Yes.
And now we're experiencing another thing that's changing the world in our lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
How many people get two massive technology changes like that in their lives? Not a lot.
No.
So it's a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be doing that stuff. And because I was preparing for this, I really want to step on the gas in artificial intelligence. So I appreciate you all introducing me to it more.
Now's the time.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most valuable thing you learned about AI during this discussion?
I think I learned some of the things like the multimodal and how that's a big deal now, but it's going to be taken for granted soon enough.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other thing is I used the example of working with an assistant, like you said, that's maybe smarter than you. It's going to raise your game, and that's going to keep getting smarter and smarter. So those are the things. And then, of course, there's the human element, or as my business partner, Dale, calls it the human condition. You're troubleshooting somebody, and they're telling you they pushed this button, but they really didn't. And you're troubleshooting, and there's always going to be the human element in the human condition that you have to consider. So it also made me realize that that's never going to go away because you always have flawed data.
Yep, absolutely.
You're always going to have somebody told you they did this and they thought they did, but they really did that.
Yeah.
So I think those are the big takeaways.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you. And, we talked about in the beginning of the conversation, I think the connotation of most people when it comes to AI is fear-based and it's the how, right? It's going to take over the world. And so it's a pleasure to have you on and also the positivity. And I love that you say we're lucky, grateful to be alive during this. Yeah. And I think if, not just you, but our audience takes that mentality on, they're going to understand AI a little differently and get curious of how they can implement it, even a small business owner, into their operation. So thank you for coming with that perspective.
My pleasure.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for listening to Go AI. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and review our podcast so we can continue to grow and offer more great AI content. If you're looking for digital marketing, digital transformation, or AI help, make sure you visit www.guardianowdigital.com. Have questions? Email team@guardianowdigital.com for answers. See you next time on Go AI.